திருச்சிற்றம்பலம். புழியர்கோன் வெப்பொழித்த புகழியர்கோன் கடல் போற்றி, ஆழிமிசை கல்மிதப்பில் அணைந்த பிரான் அடி போற்றி, வாழி திரு நாவலூர் வன்றொண்டர் பதம் போற்றி, ஊழிமலி திருவாத ஊரர் திருத்தாள் போற்றி. திருச்சிற்றம்பலம். So today we will discuss briefly the discovery of thevaram and the story of Nambi and Nambi. So we know that the thevaram saints Sambandar, Thirunavukarasar and Sundarar, they lived around somewhere around 580 through 750 of the common era, and they sang many padhigams. They went from place to place to place, and every place salam they went, they sang several one padhigam or two padhigams or 10 padhigams, depending on how long they were there at a place and what. So they went all over the south, all the way from Kalahasti to Rameswaram. You can imagine that stretch, all of the south. And they went and sang padhigams in different places, different temples. And the padhigams that they sang were extemporaneous songs, right? They will go stand in front of the Swami in the temple and songs will come out of their mouth. And then the other devotees of their, who were with them, they were writing those songs on palm leaf manuscripts. So this is how they did. They never sat down and wrote songs on palm leaf manuscripts. They just will sing extemporaneously. And obviously when a saint comes to a place and sings a padhigam, the local devotees, they are obviously thrilled to have the saint in their place, and the saint has sung a padhigam on their Swami of their temple. So they cherish that padhigam, they record it, they keep it. And of course the devotees who part of the entourage of the saint, right? Samandar always went with an entourage, maybe 30 people, maybe 100 people, I don't know, but they had an entourage with them. And they will have similarly Sundarar went around, he will have an entourage of devotees. So these people in their entourage, there were some people who were tasked with writing these verses as they are sung. So like you have like any mini organization, right? There will be different people with different roles. There will be people who will be experts in cooking, and there will be people who are expert in garland making, and there will be people who are taking care of other services that are required of the acharya and all that, right? So that kind of a thing. So there were several people who are experts in writing, documenting things on palm leaf manuscripts. And as the saint sings padhigam, they will start writing. Maybe two or three people will take copies, and then they probably were able to write at the same speed at which he was singing, right? Because they were not public speaking; they were singing musically. So the song will be sung slowly, so that the writer can write. And that way, the padhigams were all written in manuscripts, and a copy of the padhigam was obviously in the local temple, local people, they had their copies, and the entourage also had their own copies. So we know what happens to these palm leaf manuscripts, right? Over a period of time, they will decay, and you have to make fresh copies. And copying is a very laborious process. The way they will make copies of palm leaf manuscripts is that there will be a reader. Somebody will read the original manuscript or whatever is the source copy, and there will be 1 or 2 or 5 people who will be listening to him and writing that copy on their palm leaf. So it's like there will be a reader and there will be a team of writers. So this is how they will make copies. So if you have to make 10 copies, either somebody has to write 10 times, or 10 people will be writing at the same time, one will be reading them. So this is the process by which copies were made. So it was a very time consuming process and laborious, and obviously expensive, right? Because you have to pay the people, or the people, that kind of labor intensive, so it's very costly. So the palm leaf manuscripts, the copies will be few, and usually the teacher or the pandita or the scholar will have the copy in a village or in a town, and others will go to him, listen to him read it and explain it, that kind of a process. So in the olden days, people learned by listening, not by reading, and the scholar or the teacher will have original one copy, and he will memorized it. He would have memorized most of it, and he will be teaching them from memory mostly. Anyway, so this, for a period of couple of 100 years, all these palm leaf manuscripts, they get forgotten and they get lost, right? You know how things are, right? You have a bundle of palm leaf manuscripts, and then 2 generations, 3 generations later, you don't know what happened to that manuscript. And so a couple of 100 years goes away, right? This is from 600, 700. Then by the time year 1000 comes along, that's when Rajaraja Cholan comes to power as a Chola king. And the Rajaraja Cholan is a very powerful king. He is like an emperor. He had a navy. He was, he conquered places like, today's Java, Sumatra, all those places he had conquered. And he had also conquered quite large part of South India. The Chola kingdom extended into what is today's Karnataka. It extended into what is today's Andhra Pradesh and all that, right? So it extended into all those regions. And he was also a great Shiva devotee. Rajaraja Chola was the one who built the Brihadeeswara temple in Tanjavur. And those of you who have not been to the temple, make a note so that in your future trips, make it a point to go visit the temple. It's a huge temple, and it's a marvel. We cannot imagine how such a temple was built 1000 years ago. And because he was a great Shiva devotee, and he happened to hear some of the devotees singing some padhigams, and he was moved by the music, he was moved by the content of those padhigams, and he wanted to learn more about them. And they told him that these are all padhigams that were sung by the great saints like Sundarar and Tirunavukarasar and Sambandar. And then he wanted to know, where are they? How many songs are there? Who has the collection? And they all said, sir, we don't know, sir. All we know is that we know these 3 padhigams, or somebody says, I know these 2 padhigams. That's all I know. Because in those days there was no communication, right? So there was no radio, no television, obviously. So people knew only whatever they knew. And Raja Cholan was very, stressed. He said, no, such a great treasure. This is, now people don't even know where it is. They all know only fragments, right? They know the 2 padhigams, they know 1 padhigam. But the saints sang hundreds of padhigams, thousands of padhigams. What happened to them? How do I get them? How do I preserve them? And nobody knew, right? What happened to the remaining padhigams? And at that time, he heard of a miracle that occurred in Tirunarayur. In Tirunarayur, which is about, as I said, about 20-25 kilometers west of Chidambaram, there is a Shiva temple, and in that Shiva temple there was a priest who was taking care of the temple, and there was a Vinayaka Sannidhi. There is a small Vinayaka temple within that temple. And so this priest who was was doing the puja there in the temple, he had a son, maybe 5 years old, okay, or maybe 6 years old. And once that priest had to go somewhere else, maybe a wedding in the family or whatever thing, so he had to go away for a few days or a couple of days. So he told his son, son, make sure that you do the puja to the Ganesha in this temple when I'm away. So the child, child is, grows in the priest family, so he knows, what they do in puja, right? They ring the bell, they do the deepam, and then they offer some mantra, they say some mantrams, and they offer some food. So he asks, she'll ask, what should I do when I go to the temple? So father says, you say whatever, slokam, right? Whatever slokam he may have known. He said, say the slokam and ring the bell and put some flower, and then Amma will give you naivedyam. You offer the naivedyam to Vinayaka. That's all you have to do. So all done. Next day morning, the child is ready. The child's name is Nambi ANdAr Nambi. I don't know whether that is original name or name that he inherited later on, but that's the name by which we know him. And he, next day morning, he gets up, bathes and gets ready, and then his mother gives him a container with naivedyam, right? Let's say modakam. She gives him a container with naivedyam. He takes it to the temple and does the little puja that he knows, offer flower and ring the bell and all that. And then he offers the naivedyam to Vinayaka. And of course, we know what happens when you offer naivedyam, right? It's a symbolic thing. But the child, being a child, didn't realize that, and the child expected Ganesha to eat the prasadam, eat the naivedyam. And it didn't happen, right? The child suddenly feels very bad. Maybe Ganesha is upset with him. Maybe he's angry with him. Maybe he made some mistake. So he pleads with Ganesha. Please, Ganesha, eat. And finally, Ganesha comes visibly in front of the child and eats that naivedyam that the child is offering. So child is happy. And not only that, he also, because when God appears in front of you, you are blessed, right? With that, Ganesha gives him all the knowledge that he needs, right? So he comes home and he tells Amma, looks at the container, and the container is all empty. She says, where's the prasadam? Oh, the child says, Ganesha ate all of them. So mother doesn't know what to do, right? This is a child, what to make of what the child is saying. So next day when the father comes and she tells him that, and father says, is that so? Let's come, let's do. So next day the child goes and offers naivedyam, and the naivedyam vanishes. So they all know that this child is a blessed child, and Ganesha eats the prasadam naivedyam he offers. This obviously, when a miracle like this occurs, the news spreads. So that news comes to Rajaraja Chola. He hears that there is this child, Nambi ANdAr Nambi in Tirunarayur, who is able to make Ganesha eat what he offers. He wants to go see this child and see this miracle. So he loads up a cart full of fruits, whatever fruits, mangoes, bananas, whatever fruits, and then he goes to Tirunarayur, and then he meets the child and tells the child, requests the child that I have brought all these offerings for Ganesha, and I please offer it to him. And so the child takes all those fruits and offers it to Ganesha, and in the next instant they are all gone. They are all eaten by Ganesha. So Rajaraja Chola is obviously amazed that such a miracle is happening in front of his eyes, and obviously he falls at the feet of this child and says, Sir, I need another help from you. The child said, what do you need? He says, I'm looking for this thevaram. I can't find, nobody knows where those manuscripts are. Please help me. And then ANdAr Nambi prays to Ganesha, and Ganesha reveals to ANdAr Nambi that the thevaram manuscripts are kept in a room, a storeroom in Chidambaram temple. And then the child tells Rajaraj Cholan, by the time the child may be, let's say, 7 years old or whatever. And so Rajaraj Cholan and ANdAr Nambi, they both go to Chidambaram, and then with Ganesha's help, the child shows where the storeroom is. Because Chidambaram temple is a huge temple, and nobody knows, right? If something is kept in some place, and after 2 or 3 generations, nobody knows what is where. We find that in our own houses, right? After 10 years, we don't know where is something, and you can imagine in a Chidambaram temple after a couple of 100 years. So they go to that room, and it is all locked, and so they get the room opened, and to Rajaraj Cholan's shock, inside that room is a huge mound of termites. You know what happens, right? If you don't manuscripts and all those kind of things, if you are not properly caring for it, white ants will come and eat them away. So all he finds was termite mounds in that room. Then Rajaraj Cholan gets people, is meant to pour oil on those termite mounds and drive away the white ants and retrieve whatever manuscripts are available still. So a lot of manuscripts have been destroyed by the white ants, and some of them were remaining. And whatever was remaining were taken out, and then ANdAr Nambi read through all of them and collated all of them and organized all of them into a particular sequence. And in order to do that, these are all musical songs, right? Thevaram is all musically sung by the saints, and Rajaraj Cholan did not know how they were sung, because they did not record the ragam, what ragam they were singing. And if you remember, when we were discussing the story of Thiruñāna Sambandar and Thirunilakanta Yāழ்pānar, you know that Thirunilakanta Yāழ்pānar was a musician who accompanied Sambandar on all his tours, and whenever Sambandar was singing padhigam, Yāழ்pānar will be accompanying on his veena. So Rajaraj Cholan requested the musician families to find out the expert among them, and they identified a lady in a place called Irukkathambuliyur, and she comes from the lineage of Thirunilakanta Yāழ்pānar's side, right? Their Yāழ்pānar families. So she comes and she looks at these manuscripts, and then based on her musical knowledge and a lot of other things, she describes what ragams these were to be sung in. And Rajaraj Cholan documented all those ragams in these manuscripts, and then ANdAr Nambi arranged all these padhigams. So he took all the Sambandar padhigams, arranged them in the order of ragam, what is known as pan in Tamil. He arranged them, and similarly arranged Tirunavukkarasar's padhigams into collection and Sundara's padhigams into collection. So he compiled, the palm leaf manuscripts, they will be huge, right? So he compiled them into volumes. So volume 1, volume 2, volume 3 are the volume Sambandar Thevaram songs. Volume 4, 5 and 6 are Tirunavukkarasar Thevaram songs. volume 7 is Sundarar Thevaram songs. He compiled them, and Rajaraja Cholan wanted to ensure that these Thevaram verses are preserved forever. They were written in palm leaf manuscripts which are easily destroyable or which can easily get destroyed. So he ensured that they will not be lost again. Whatever was available to him at that time, he made sure that they are preserved on copper plates. So they inscribed all the Thevaram verses that were available at this time on copper plates. And then he requested Nambi ANdAr Nambi, sir, now that we have compiled these Thevaram verses, there are other such verses of other saints. We should also compile them so that people have them available to them readily. And so what Nambi ANdAr Nambi did was, then he compiled other songs of other saints. So he created the fourth Acharya, Manikavachakar. All the songs that Manikavachakar had sung, he compiled them as the 8th volume. That's what we commonly refer to as Thiruvachakam and Thirukkovayar. That's the 8th volume. Then he compiled musical songs of a bunch of other saints who were later than some of Sundarar's period, but before are contemporaries of his time. Right? Nambi ANdAr Nambi's contemporaries are also there, right? Saints. So all that he compiled into 9th volume. Then there is a thirumuRai we have seen, one of the 63 nayanmars. He took all songs of thirumuRai, that is a thirumandram. Right? Thirumandram is a huge philosophical work containing about 3,000 songs. He took all of them and compiled as the 10th volume. And then there were other saints like Karaikalamayar, Seraman Perumal Nayanar, and other saints who have sung other works. He compiled all of them into 11th volume. So Nambi ANdAr Nambi, during his lifetime, right, from the time he was a child saint till the end of his life, this was his major thing, that he recovered the Thevaram verses, he compiled them and codified them, and that's a monumental work in those days. Okay, and then not only that, he was a saint and he was a Ganesha devotee. So he also sang many works. He sang devotional songs on Ganesha, which are contained in, and then he also sang a major work called tiruttoṇḍattogai. Remember the 7.13 padhigam that we have seen, tiruttoṇḍattogai, that listed all the 63 nayanmar names, but there was not much info about their life history. So Nambi ANdAr Nambi, again based on his knowledge and based on what Ganesha revealed to him, based on that he wrote a work called tiruttoṇḍattogai, in which for each saint, each of the nayanmars, he sang one verse. So if there is let's say somebody like Tirunilakanda Yāழ்panar, he will sing one verse in which he will say, Tirunilakanda Yāழ்panar, what town he hailed from, what varanam or what jati he was from, and what was his main service to Shiva. How did we achieve greatness? What did he do to achieve the nayanar level fame, right? The greatness. So he will describe the service that the nayanar did, all in 4 lines of one verse. So some Sundarar said just the name often. For that name, Nambi ANdAr Nambi sang one verse, 4 lines, describing that place, the heritage, and the service that he did, highlighting all of them. And he was a great devotee of Sambandar, right? Because Sambandar was the one who has revived Shaivam, and is the primary acharya or the first acharya in this sequence. And he sang several works praising Sambandar. He also has sung works on praising Tirunavukkarasar, and all his works, we don't think that, I don't think he would have included in the 11th volume himself. All his works after his time probably were added to the 11th volume by others of that time. So the Nambi ANdAr Nambi compiled the 11 volumes of the 12 volume Saiva canon, and Nambi ANdAr Nambi is his own verses, his own creations. His works were added to the 11th volume. And then another 150 years or so passes by, or maybe 200 years, maybe 150 years, I think. Then Sekhirar comes along. And Sekhirar was a chief minister of a Chola king. And Sekhirar sets out on a big project, his magnum opus, Periya Puranam. And Periya Puranam, he takes the Tiruttoṇḍattogai as his table of contents, and on each of the devotees that are mentioned in Tiruttoṇḍattogai, building upon what Nambi ANdAr Nambi has said in Tiruttoṇḍattogai, he writes a huge epic, Periya Puranam. Periya Puranam has about 4,250 songs or so. And in this Periya Puranam, he sings every devotee to the extent he has information. So some saints, their lives are very elaborately described. So Sambandar story, right? Triñana Sambandar's life is described in about 1200 songs or something like that. So about 30% of Periya Puranam is Sambandar story. And similarly, Tirunavukkarasar's story he sings in about 420 songs, something like that, 400 plus songs. Sundarar's story is also very, very big. He mentions Sundarar's story in several places, in the beginning of the work, in the middle of the work, at the end of the work. So in a sense, Sundarar is the hero for Periya Puranam, because he is the one who has given the names of these devotees and who is the who is the sort of the source for all these things. So he made him a hero, and also his life follows the life of a hero, right? Sundarar, life has all kinds of rasams, right? There's sudden twists, turns, shock, wonder, sadness, happiness, love, everything is there in his life. So he fits the kind of a hero in whose life he can bring out all the various rasas of a kavyam. So that's how Sekhirar builds the Periya Puranam. And the Periya Puranam is so special and so great that the religious leaders who came afterwards, right, other saints and other religious leaders who came after his time, considered this to be so important and so great that it had to be added to the codified list of Saiva works. So they added it as the 12th volume of the Saiva canon. That's how we have this 12 volume, Panniru thirumuRai, or the 12 thirumuRais. That's how they are compiled. So the reason why I mentioned was that the Nambi ANdAr Nambi is so special, and Sekhirar did a wonderful thing, because without Sekhirar we would not have known the greatness of the devotees. We would not have known the key episodes in their lives that that helps us understand how they served the Lord, and also the stories of Sambandar and Tirunavukkarasar, all the things that they have done, right? Sekhirar studied all the thevaram songs and ensured that he knew what sequence in which they were sung, because of the chronologically, right, how they went from place to place and in what context some padhigam was sung. So for many padhigams in thevaram, we have context given in Periya Puranam, in which situation this padhigam was sung. Of course, not all padhigams we know the context, right? So if there are, let's say, 780 odd padhigams in thevaram, we may have the context for maybe 200, 250, 300 of those padhigams. Other 500 padhigams, we don't have the context. They just went to their place, they sang the padhigam. There is no story or no special significance that we can elaborate on the padhigam. But for many padhigams, Sacred describes the background, what happened, why they sang this padhigam, when this padhigam was sung. And like that, in the tiruttoṇḍattogai, Sacred gives the background. In what context this tiruttoṇḍattogai was sung, that's how we know the stories that we are talking. So in 7.39, when Dharmapuram Swaminathan sings this padhigam, he is giving one or two songs from Periya Puranam to provide the context for this padhigam, and he is singing the padhigam. So that is the background of discovery of thevaram and the compilation of thevaram and Periya Puranam. So any comments, questions? We can talk.
Oh,
if not, yeah, go ahead.
No, I think that explanation makes sense. Yeah, and how that's been aligned. Okay, good.
Okay, very good. So we'll conclude with this for today, and we'll continue in the next session. Tiruttoṇḍattogai.